How does all this impact the campaign? To find out that and much more, our campaign leader interviews continue now with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Mr. Singh, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
I got to just go back to that moment when you saw first the brown face and then the black face and then the video of the black face. What was your reaction when you saw Mr. Trudeau doing that?
First off, I was shocked. It was brought to my attention when I was in a town hall, so I didn't see the images. When I saw the first image, it was jarring. It was more than I expected. Hearing it described and seeing it was very different. And then seeing the multiple images come out, I moved quickly from thinking about how it impacted me to thinking about the people around me. A lot of friends and people very close to me sent me messages about how it impacted them. And I thought about all the kids growing up in this beautiful country that are going to see those images and then start to wonder, what does that mean if the Prime Minister of the country can make light of their lived realities? What does that mean about their place in this country? And I was worried about that. Yeah,
actually, even my kids, to be candid, came home and said they were talking about it in class. The debate is, does Justin Trudeau have bad judgment or is he a racist? And I'm going to ask you, is he a racist?
Well, I think that's not really the useful question to ask. I think definitely he had bad judgment, there's no question about that. But really it's about his impact, the impact of his decisions, the impact of his actions on people, and what that says about our country and what that says about people who feel now that they don't belong. It really has to be about the people as opposed to him.
What does it say, though?
Well, it says that someone at the highest institution doesn't really understand the lived experiences of people. And then if you look at the pattern of behavior, we've got incidences as recently as last year where in private, Mr. Trudeau makes fun of activists who are saying our water is poisoned with mercury in Grassy Narrows. And the thought that someone could make fun of people, and I've been to Grassy Narrows, who are living with mercury poisoning, to me is just shocking and appalling. Now seeing the pattern of behavior, it's not as shocking. Maybe there's a very different...
So if you're saying it's a pattern, if your argument is that this is a pattern that he's been masking, what are you saying? What is Mr. Trudeau? Who is he?
Well, I'm saying there's two Mr. Trudeaus. There's the first apology, Mr. Trudeau, and then the second apology, Mr. Trudeau. Which one is the real Mr. Trudeau? There's also a in private Mr. Trudeau and an in public, and they're both very different.
You are going to meet with him, apparently, in private to discuss this. First, do you accept his apology and his request for forgiveness?
It's not on me to accept that or on me to forgive him. It's on Canadians who are impacted by this. And it's really got to be about them. No one person can be proxy for all the people that have been impacted and hurt.
So if he asks,
it's really their decision to make.
If he says, I want your forgiveness and I'm sorry, do you accept his apology? Mr. Scheer says, I don't accept his apology because he was not honest in his first disclosure. Do you accept his apology?
Well, again, it's putting too much emphasis on Mr. Trudeau because it's not about him and it's not about me accepting anything from him. It's about him showing his true self and what he believes in and what his values are and what Canadians make of that. And Canadians will decide. And they've got a clear track record. Not only has he made decisions that have shown that he doesn't get what people are going through and has made light of it, he's also recently made decisions that continue to give power and privilege and support to those at the very top that has hurt people. Everyone else.
Mr. Singh, when you meet with him in private, two quick questions. One, what will you say to him? What's the message you will deliver to him?
Well, I've said really clearly that the conversation is something that Mr. Trudeau's office contacted my office requesting that Mr. Trudeau wanted to chat. And so I made it really clear I don't want to be a part of any PR expedition to try to seek out exoneration. I would be willing to hear his sincere concerns if he wants to bring them up. And we'll have a frank conversation.
But are you concerned? It's a campaign. Everything is political. He'll say, well, I've met with Mr. Scheer. I can't disclose it, but I've really dealt with this. And it looks like he's confronting it. And you become a political pawn in this. You're a validating factor that he needs.
Well, I want to make it very clear. I'm not going to validate Mr. Trudeau. If he wants to have a conversation with me, it's his decision to do so. And I've made it really clear my conditions. I don't want to be used in any way. I'm not going to be a checklist on a list of things that he's done to try to seek redemption. Canadians will decide that. And Canadians have a lot of evidence now to make that decision.
Mr. Singh, you said after Andrew Scheer's comments about LGBTQ and same-sex marriage that you, in a minority government, you would say, I'm just ruling out I could never work with Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives. Now look at Mr. Trudeau, the blackface, the brownface, SNC, the Aga Khan. Could you now work with Mr. Trudeau in a minority government situation?
Well, I've only ruled out Mr. Scheer very clearly for very specific policy reasons. The fact that his policy seems to be very unclear around his candidates and around women's right to choose and around same-sex marriage and LGBTQ communities and climate crisis. So based on all these policy, uncertainties that he's presenting, I've made it very clear I will not be able to support him.
Okay, but go back to Mr. Trudeau. Does the blackface, brownface, and other issues, these scandals, preclude you working with him? Or if there is that situation, you'd say, you know what, I could still work with Mr. Trudeau despite all that?
What I would say to that is that with respect to going forward, if anyone wants to work with me to bring in place universal medication coverage for all, or the dental care plan that we're really proud of announcing that will cover all Canadians who aren't covered, who earn less than $70,000, I'm prepared to work with people who want to work with me.
Okay, so this is not a disqualifying lapse in judgment to you, this scandal?
For me, what I want to make clear is there are certain things that are going to help Canadians out. And if there's people who want to work with me to make that happen, I'm prepared to sit down and have a conversation.
Do you agree with Andrew Scheer's assessment that Justin Trudeau's lost the, quote, moral authority to govern? That's what he says, but if you're still prepared to work with him, do you think he hasn't?
Well, I'm running to become Prime Minister, so I'll take the support of anyone who wants to work towards goals that will improve people's lives. In terms of Mr. Trudeau's lack of judgment, I think that his policy decisions, the fact that he gave $14 billion away to the wealthiest corporations to buy jets and limousines is a lapse of judgment. The fact that he continues to allow so many Indigenous communities to be without clean drinking water is a lapse of judgment. And the fact that he picked the pockets of students to the tune of $3 billion by profiting off of student debt, that's a lapse of judgment.
Okay, we're going to get to that, but one last question on this particular issue that's dominated the campaign. What if Mr. Trudeau's now said he's not sure if there are more pictures of him in blackface or brownface? He won't say the number. If more pictures emerge, then what, Mr. Singh?
Well, we have to have a very serious discussion as a country about what that means for someone holding the highest office of the land and how that impacts Canadians, how they're going to look at themselves and think that the policies that have made their lives even more difficult, maybe that's informed by the fact that someone holding the highest office doesn't understand the struggles they go through, doesn't understand how severe and serious racism is or systemic racism is.
So you don't write it off as youthful indiscretion. Someone said to me, oh, well, he was young, he was 29. I mean, 29, but in high school. You don't buy those excuses.
Well, I mean, I've spoken with teachers who say that an educator, being in that context, should know the impact of these things. And really, the impact of those things are real. I had a meeting yesterday with a lot of young people, young leaders, and they're saying that, seeing this makes them worried about the rise of more white supremacy. If the Prime Minister can make light of people for their color of their skin or their lived experiences, why would that stop someone else from saying, you know what, we can judge people based on who they are or judge them based on the color of their skin or their sexuality or their identity? It's going to embolden people who are already putting out these ideas that are divisive.
You linked it to white supremacy. That's powerful. All right.